Hey there, it's Listen Communications, and welcome back to another review, this time of A Nightmare on Elm Street for The Dream Master. Dream Master is a 1988 horror sequel, uh, and it's directed by Renny Harlin. It was released on August 19th, 1988, and it was a huge hit. It made $49.3 million on a $13 million budget, which was, I think at the time, the highest budget that a film in the franchise had. And it definitely does show on screen. The film looks great. Um, it it does use the budget very well. I would say this is the film that has the best practical makeup effects out of the entire franchise. It's really impressive because they not only had the talents of Steve Johnson and Kevin Yeager and all these other talents like Robert Berger and some things like that. They also had the talents of Screaming Mad George. So they had like an entire, smorgasbord of really talented makeup special effects artists. They even had the guys from Dreamquest who worked on some of the practical makeup effects as well. So it was just a really who's who of makeup effects artists and special effects guys, and it really blended together to create a very, very impressive looking film. And it was the most successful slasher film of that year, and it was the most successful horror film of that year. It was a big hit. I mean, you look at the numbers now, it doesn't seem like it's that much, but $49.3 million in 1988 on a $13 million budget for a company like New Line, that's a big hit. Um, the film is, like I said, it's directed by Renny Harlin. Renny Harlin, before this, he directed a horror film called Prison, and Robert Shea pretty much only hired Renny because he saw that he was a big, tall, strapping young man, and he thought he had the right amount of stamina to be able to stand up to the film's rigorous shooting schedule. So that's a big reason why he hired him. I think he was suggested by Rachel Talalay, who was also one of the producers of the film. She had faith in Rennie because she saw Prison and she really loved the film and she wanted to see his style, his flair for the visual and the dramatic, and the ability to use all these camera tricks and things like that. She wanted to see that brought to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So she had more faith in Rennie than Robert Shea did, because when we met with Rennie for the first little meeting, he wasn't very convinced because Rennie's coming up with these really bad ideas for the film, and he's like, I don't know, he's gonna ruin the franchise. And but he decided, all right, we're gonna go with Rennie because we don't have any other option, and we need to get started going on this film as soon as possible so we can get it out for the August 19th release date because it was a release that was pretty much set in stone. And so Rennie got the job, and Rennie did a great job. Rennie, honestly, I would say his direction in this is the most visually impressive direction out of the entire franchise. Maybe Wes Craven's New Nightmare is a close, is close to it, but his direction in this was really great. I mean, his flair for the visuals, the way he used the camera tricks and the camera techniques and the pans and everything, and the way that he did it just created a very unique new looking dream world that you really hadn't seen in the other films. None of the other films had the style that Rennie's film has in Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Um, it's definitely a very visually pleasing and visually stunning film to look at. It's great. Reddy did a fantastic job, and a little bit underrated in that aspect. I don't think. I know Chuck Russell did a great job with part three, but there's something about part four that just stands out so much to me. It's just that every dream sequence just looks so surreal, and the way that it's set up, the film just is full of life. The direction itself just is and imbues the film with so much energy that that is honestly on par with Freddy Krueger himself. Freddy Krueger's this energetic, crazy maniac, and part four, the direction has the same energy as Freddy Krueger has. So finally, you have a film. The film itself actually matches the personality and the vigor of Freddy, which is really nice to see. And Renny wasn't the first choice, though. The New Line was really considering doing Tibor Takacs. I don't know if I said his last name correctly, but he's the guy who directed The Gate. And they were heavily considering him to do the film, but there was a problem where Tibor, he was offered to direct, but he didn't take the job because shooting would have started in a couple weeks, and he wanted a little bit more time to prepare. So I thought that was interesting that Tibor Takacs was originally the choice that New Line wanted for Nightmare 4. I think he would have done a good job as well, but I'm really glad Renny got the opportunity. This was because of this film and its success that Renny got his foot in the door and was able to add his talents to films like Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger and The Adventures of Fort Fairlane, which are another film, which are a bunch of other movies I really like. So this is a big. This is the film that broke Renny Harlin into the mainstream. So I'm really glad he got the chance to do that. It's based on a screenplay. It says Scott Hedgeland and Scott Pierce by a story by William Cotswinkle and Brian Hedgeland. Really, what happened was, yes, it was originally based on that story by Brian Hedgeland and Scott Pierce, but then there was a writer's strike that happened, and then they had to get some other writers. They had Jim and Ken Wheat came in and worked on the screenplay, and then because while they were working on the screenplay, the writer's strike happened, and so then they were working on their second draft. Writer's strike happens, and then there's just all this craziness. So there was a lot of problems. They had to end up just writing the script on set sometimes. It was pretty crazy. I mean, Brian Hedgeland was hired to write the film after being recommended by Robert Englund because he had penned the screenplay for 2976 Evil. The film had a release date set, but no script or director, and Hedgeland was hired under the condition that he could deliver the script within 7 days. He was advised by New Line head Robert Shea that the script came in a day late. They didn't want it, and Hedgeland flew home to Massachusetts for Christmas, and he wrote the script sitting at his father's kitchen table. They FedExed the finished screenplay back to Los Angeles and made his deadline. Based on the script, director Renny Harlin signed on, and the film marks Hedgeland's first screen credit. Though 976 Evil was his first produced screenplay, it was released after A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. So, yeah, he worked on the screenplay, but Jim and Ken Wheat came in, and they worked on it as well. And there's some scenes where they actually ended up having, some of the cast members ended up writing English, or writing dialogues for the scene. The scene where Alice and Rick are watching home videos was a last-minute addition. In an interview with Andras Jones, he stated that because of the writer's strike and because of Renny Harlin's poor English, he and Lisa Wilcox wrote their own dialogue for it. Which you kind of say, hey, they did a pretty good job. They did a good job writing the dialogue. But yeah, so there's a lot of craziness going on with this film. You have the writing strike. It's pretty amazing. Excuse me. Got a little itch in my throat there. I think it's pretty amazing that this film turned out as well as it did, considering everything, all the problems that it had to deal with. The writer's strike, and all this and that, and that's a big thing to have to deal with while you're trying to get a film done on a pretty strict deadline. And they did a really good job. And Rachel Talalay says, because of the writer's strike, that's why you can see all these plot holes in the script, and I didn't really notice any. So maybe it's just because I wasn't looking for any, but I didn't really see any plot holes, but that's just me personally. So anyway, yeah, the screenplay, I mean, anybody who was involved, they did a good job of what they had to work with and what they were dealing with. The score, I think, is honestly a huge step up from Part 3. The score by Craig Safan and John Easdale. Craig Safan is a great choice to do the score. Craig Safan's a very underrated composer anyway. I love Craig Safan. I love his score for Last Starfighter. He does a great job here, and he actually does something that none of the other scores up until this point had done, where they take Charles Bernstein's music, his iconic Nightmare on Elm Street theme from the first film, and he ends up tweaking it enough in order to make it his own. And I really love that, because he changed it enough that it wasn't an exact carbon copy like the bits of the score that was used in the score for Part 3. And Craig Safan did a great job with the score. It's a big step up from Part 3. Cinematography by Steven Fierberg, I think, was good, really solid. It did a great job with light and shadows, and really really, Steven Spielberg's cinematography really worked really well with Renny Harlin's style of directing. Um, the film wouldn't look as amazing as it does without Steven's work as well, so he did a great job with that. And there were about 3 editors, and they all did a great job. Michael N. Canu, Jack Turner, and Chuck Weiss. They all did a great job editing the film. It's very seamless. It's one of the I think it's one of the fastest paced films in the franchise. It goes by really quick. It's only about 93 minutes, but it feels a lot shorter than that. And I think without the end credits, it's definitely a lot shorter than that. It's about an hour and 25, an hour and 26 minutes or something. Um, or I think it's like an hour and a half, maybe. Hour and 29, but it's a pretty short film. It goes by really quick. That's a testament to the editing that's really, really, really good. And then, of course, you have the cast where you have Robert Englund returns as Freddy Krueger, just as charismatic and just as awesome as he always has been. This is definitely the first film. This is the film where it really started to become, okay, Freddy's not necessarily there to scare you anymore. He's there to entertain you. And the film really does succeed in that regard. Freddy's got some great one-liners, Robert's having a blast, and even Renny Harlin said in an interview on the Blu-ray and on the DVD on the Nightmare Encyclopedia, where he talks about how he wanted to make Freddy like James Bond because he wanted to make it Freddy's film. And it definitely does feel like that it is Freddy's movie. Freddy's the star. And that was really nice to see. This is probably one of the Nightmare on Elm Street film that has probably the most screen time for Freddy. Freddy is in the film a lot, and I think that's a good thing because Freddy's a very cool character, and that's what Renny Harlin wanted to do. He wanted to give Freddy all this screen time so he could be cool, and he's this cool, suave killer, and he wanted to bring that sort of James Bond sort of spotlight to Freddy Krueger. And this is also the first film where Robert Englund gets top billing. So you have Robert Englund who plays Freddy Krueger, Lisa Wilcox who plays Alice Johnson. Lisa Wilcox is amazing. I think her performance in this is unbelievably underrated. I think she's a horror icon. I think she's a scream queen up there with the likes of Jamie Lee Curtis and Heather Langenkamp. And actually, I really like Heather Langenkamp, but after watching this again, I would probably, in terms of the franchise, I would put Lisa just a little bit, just a step above Heather. Because Lisa, I love her character. She's this shy character who has these daydreams. She really doesn't have, she wants to break out. She wants to be more, be more powerful, not be as shy, and she's able to do that in her daydreams, but she doesn't have the guts to do it in real life. And then when all this tragedy happens and all her friends die, and she gets the souls of her friends inside of her, she ends up getting the strength to break down these walls and stop being so shy and kick some ass. And I really like that aspect of the character, and I love the way that it's portrayed in the film with the mirror that has all the pictures of her friends on it, and it covers up the mirror, and then with every death she takes a picture off, and then she leaves a little memento of sorts of her friend, and then it gets to the end and she takes all the pictures off and she gears up and then basically gears up, she like a montage, and then gets ready and then kicks Freddy's ass. Like, she's the only girl in the franchise other than Lisa Zane who really kicked Freddy's ass. I mean, I'm talking beating his ass, like punching him, kicking him, and it's awesome. I really love Alice. She's great. And Lisa Wilcox is also gorgeous. She's fine. She's a beautiful woman. And this is a great performance. And it's her first acting role. That's what's really impressive too. It's her first acting role. She really did a bang up fantastic job with her performance in this. And I guess there were about hundreds of people who tried auditioning for the role of Alice. There's a lot of people who tried auditioning for the role, but it was Lisa Wilcox that ended up getting the role. I think it was like hundreds of actresses, and So yeah, over 600 actresses, according to Annette Benson, the casting director, auditioned for the role of Alice, and it was newcomer Lisa Wilcox that ended up getting the role. Then you have Danny Hassel plays Dan Jordan, who of course he was in the last film. Actually he's a new character. I'm getting confused with part 5. Excuse me. Just talking about part 5 is fucking up my throat. Fuck part 5. Um, Danny Hassel plays Dan Jordan. There wasn't the character who's playing didn't really have a name until we just decided, okay, it's Dan. Brooke Theiss plays Debbie Stevens. You have Andras Jones who plays Rick Johnson. Lisa Wilcox's Alice's brother. Tuesday Knight plays Kristen Parker. She replaces Patricia Arquette because Patricia Arquette couldn't reprise her role because she was pregnant during the time of filming. And I thought Tuesday Knight she was there. I think Patricia Arquette did a better job performance-wise as a whole, but there were definitely moments though where Tuesday Knight really did a great job acting-wise. It was just a bit uneven for me. Maybe it's because of Renny Harlin, or probably not Renny's fault. I thought Tuesday did a good job though, for the most part. I didn't think she was cringe-inducingly terrible or anything, and there was definitely some good scenes, especially when she fights back against her mom. I thought were actually really good performances. She was good, and of course she contributed a great song in the opening credits. Running from this nightmare, which is this is the only film in the franchise too that opened up with a song, which I think is too bad because I really like that. That's the sort of James Bond sort of feel it's got. I love that song, and I'm running from this nightmare. So it's a great song. And then you have Troy Newkirk plays Sheila. Toy Newkirk, not Troy. Yeah, her name was Troy. No, Toy Newkirk plays Sheila. Rodney Eastman returns as Joey Peterson, one of the Dream Warriors. So does Ken Sagoes as Ronald Kincaid, as Roland Kincaid. I can't fucking say their names. Roland Kincaid. Nicholas Melee plays Dr. Dennis Johnson. Mr. Dennis Johnson, not Doctor, because it's her dad. It's Alice's dad, John Dennis. And then Brooke Bundy plays Elaine Parker. She reprises her role as Kirsten's mom. Now, Ken Sagoes and Rodney Eastman were under the belief that they were going to have bigger roles in the film, and they were kind of upset when they found out that no, they're just in it for a little bit and then they die, which I wouldn't blame them. That's one part of the film I'm not a big fan of. I don't like the idea of killing off all of the Dream Warriors. It does kind of remind me a bit of Alien 3, but the rest of the movie makes up for it because it's fucking badass, and you got Alice, and you got Freddy, doing some awesome stuff, and some of the best kills in the franchise, and one of the best looking films in the franchise, and the really cool, ingenious camera tricks and techniques, and editing and things like that and transitions to make up for it. So, and the good score and the soundtrack. So it's like, and there's other characters that I like as well. So once the Dream Warriors die off, you still have, Debbie and Dan and Rick, who I do like Rick because he's into martial arts and he's a pretty cool guy. So so there's still characters that you like, unlike Alien 3 where, Hicks and Newt die and then Ripley's a bitch and there's no one else. So it's kind of the same sort of thing, but not as bad. It's not as bad, and it's not as insulting because at least for Ken Sagoes, at least Ken Sagoes fought back. He threw a car on top of Freddy. At least he fought back before he died. Rodney Eastman, can't say the same, even though it's a good death, but he fell for the same trick that he fell for against Freddy earlier with the nurse in part 3. I'm like, why are you falling for this again, Joey? You should stop thinking with your dick, especially when it comes to Freddy. But anyway, I just wanted to do a rundown of the cast. The cast, they all did their jobs really well. And here's the basic gist of the plot here. Some time has passed since the events of the previous film, where Kristen, Kincaid, and Joey have all been released from Weston Hills and are living lives as normal teenagers. When Kristen, believing Freddy is coming back, summons Joey and Kincaid into her dreams, she angers them, and they warn her that dreaming of Freddy might actually cause his return. And that's the scene where they're in the boiler room, and the boiler, and then and Sagoes and Rodney Eastman are trying to tell Tuesday Night, it's cold. Freddy's gone. Freddy's dead. Stop. We all want to, go on to having better dreams. And then it's Ken Sago's Kincaid's dog named Jason pops out and bites Tuesday Night on the arm. And so the next day, Kristen then picks up her boyfriend, Rick Johnson, and his sister, and Kristen's best friend, Alice. And then going to school, she meets with their other friends, Sheila, a genius and asthmatic, Debbie, a tough girl who doesn't like bugs. She's, also into bodybuilding, and she even crushes a bug. And there's a fun line of dialogue where Sheila's talking to her, and it was like, hey, Supergirl, it's dead. It's Rick, actually. Rick says the line. It's like, hey, Supergirl, it's dead. Give the bug a break. And then Sheila, it's not Sheila, it's, my bad, I'm getting characters mixed up. I'm sorry, I just saw part 5 of Dream Child last night. It's fucked up my brain cells. I'm still recovering from that awful experience. Yeah, you have some fun lines, like Debbie has a line where she's, this jock guy's, making fun of Sheila and her inhaler because she's asthmatic. And he's like, hey, baby, you're sucking on the wrong nozzle. And then Debbie's like, hey, yo, needle dick, I bet you're the only male in this school suffering from penis envy. And then even you find out that Debbie needs help with her math homework because she didn't do it because she decided to watch Dynasty instead. And then she talks to Sheila about it, and then she's ragging Sheila a bit about her scooters. Like, how can you ride this health hazard? It's no wonder that you have asthma. She was like, no, you see, asthma is an inherited condition. Read a book now and then, and you might know something. Debbie's like, speaking of books, isn't Trig your favorite? Then Sheila nods, and then she realizes what Debbie is asking, and she was like, Dynasty again? And she was like, Debbie smiles, and Sheila then replies, just like, Deb, do us a favor and get a VCR. So these characters were still fun. So even though the film ended up killing off Joey and Kincaid, you still had fun characters that ended up making up for it. That still made the film really entertaining and fun to watch. So it didn't have that drop off, too big of a drop off after they do get killed by Freddy. Alice daydreams of her crush Dan Jordan, recognizing her in the same sort of sequence, but she snaps out of it, and Rick teases he can introduce them. That night, Kristen stays awake to keep from dreaming, but Kincaid falls asleep, and he awakens in a junkyard where his dog Jason innocently resurrects Freddy from his grave. Really, not really. It's not really innocently. This is one scene I don't like. For the most part, I'm just going to say it right here. This film, I feel, is on par in terms of quality, in terms of overall enjoyment with Part 3. I really love this movie. But there's just a few things that bring it just down to the same level as Part 3. And just little things that just, the killing off the Dream Warriors and then stuff like this. Like, Jason pees fire, and that's what brings Freddy back. That's just stupid. I'm sorry. I really don't like that. I've never liked that. I don't like that. I think it's dumb. It's so silly. It's just about as silly and stupid as the scene in Batman and Robin when the dog is frozen solid while it's taking a piss on a fire hydrant. It's just... And there's a fun story about that, too. Is that, according to Renny Harlin, while he was writing the film, Renny Harlin, some of the producers, they happened to bump into James Cameron. And Cameron somewhat facetiously asked Harlan, how are they going to bring Freddy back to life this time? To which Harlan also somewhat facetiously, kind of slyly he replied, a dog pisses fire on him and he comes back to life. The idea then ended up being used in the film, although in a more metaphorical manner than in a literal sense. Well, actually, no, it still was literally. The dog did piss fire and then brought him back to life. So it's not really metaphorical. And then Robert Englund explains that the dog urinating fire onto Freddy's remains is meant to symbolize a hellhound and how evil Freddy really is. I don't know. I really don't buy that. That just seems like Robert's just trying to make it sound not as ridiculous as it is. Like, see, it's not that ridiculous. No, it's still a dog pissing fire that brings Freddy back to life. Just really. So it brings Freddy back to life. But at least the resurrection scene is worth it. It's a great effect. With Freddy's bones coming back together. It reminds me totally out of something out of Hellraiser. Um, really great effects. And Freddy gets brought back, and then of course he says that line, "You shouldn't have buried me. I'm not dead." So I'm like, oh, wow, did Wes Craven see this and then was like, oh no, let's write this line in for Surfing in the Rainbow. No, probably not. I think Surfing the Rainbow probably was being worked on around the same time. So, but it's kind of interesting. The Surfing the Rainbow, I believe, was also that was a 1988 film as well. So that's kind of funny. So in the same year, you have Freddy saying, "You shouldn't have buried me. I'm not dead." And then you have the line in Surfing the Rainbows, "Please don't bury me. I'm not dead." So, oh man, two great movies too. Have that same line in common. So anyway, so Kincaid ends up getting killed by Freddy. He tries to fight him off. He throws a car on him. Freddy gets back up, kills him. Uh, one down, two to go. And then he goes after Joey. He falls for the same trick again, where he ends up he falls asleep, and then he sees this supermodel and with her top off floating around in his waterbed, and it's actually a really good effect. And I'll never think of waterbeds the same way after seeing this sequence. You'll just think that there's gonna be a hot chick in it, or Freddy's gonna pop out of it like a crocodile stalking his prey and then fucking kill me. But I always liked that scene, the way it was shot, and it was a cool concept. But Joey falls for the same thing again. It's like he didn't die in part 3 with the girl where he gets tongue tied, but here it's like, yeah, well, yeah, here he goes. Thinking with his dick, should have thought with his brain when it comes to Freddy, but it didn't work out, and that's why he died. How's this for a wet dream? And then he pulls him down, and then his mom finds him in his waterbed, dead. So he drowns him, kills him, and then at school, Kristen, of course, drowns him and slashes him up a bit. And then at school, Kristen panics because she notices Joey and Kincaid missing and then is knocked out. I think it's Rick who shoved her against a wall. And then she's nearly attacked by Freddy when the school nurse wakes her up. She has her dream, and then you see Robert Englund in drag, which is not an image I want to see. Robert Englund drag, no. Honestly, that's a little bit scarier than Freddy. The Robert Englund in drag is just, ugh. And then Freddy's all like, how about some, can I want to take some blood, I want to draw some blood. So I kind of chuckled at, because my mom, for the longest time, she worked at a hospital, and she drew blood for a living. So I'm like, a phlebotomist joke in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. I want to draw some blood. So she wakes up, and then, of course, it's an actual nurse and not Robert Englund drag that wakes her up. And then Kristen then tells Rick and Alice and Dan about Freddy's legacy before her mother Elaine shoos the three of them away from the rundown Krueger house. And speaking of the Krueger house, the film had a really cool intro, I thought, where Kristen ends up going inside the Krueger house, and the way it was shot and the whole set and everything was really well done. And then at dinner, Kristen notices that her mother slipped her some sleeping pills. She falls, and then there's a good performance by Tuesday Night where she pretty much tells off her mother, saying, "You killed me," pretty much. And she's ready to pass out, and she falls asleep before calling Alice. Taking her advice on dreaming, Kristen tries to dream someplace for fun, but Freddy invades and forces Freddy back to his home. Forces Kristen back to his home, and Freddy goes back to his home. Pretty much what happens is that's where she dreams at the beach sequence. and then the shark fin of Freddy's claw with Freddy's claws on it go down the start appearing in the water, and then slam through the beach, and he shows up, and then basically shoves her in some quicksand. Then she falls into Freddy's house, and then in that sequence alone, they were when the guys were shooting that sequence, when the producers were shooting that sequence, and they had Robert on set, and they didn't expect as many fans to show up. It became fucking insane. Like there was thousands of fans that showed up, and Robert Shea, I believe it was Robert Shea, was with Freddy. He was like seriously worried for their safety and their well-being, and so he started saying to Robert, is like, hey, just put your glove out the window, and he does that, and people are like, oh, like people went insane, and then, hey Robert, stick your head out the window and like stick out your tongue or something like that, and he does that. He sticks out his head out the window and goes and then everybody goes fucking nuts. And then Robert gets out of the van, and then he just does this whole thing where he starts, doing Freddy stuff and just posing for the crowd, and that shows you how big of a phenomenon Freddy Krueger was, and in many ways still is. Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger. Nobody else in that makeup is gonna get that kind of pop and that kind of reaction. So anyway. So they have that sequence. Then she falls into Freddy's house, and being the last of the Elm Street children, Freddy goads Kristen into calling in one of her friends so that his fun can begin anew. She then calls Alice into her dream, which I really like this concept, that he needs, in order to start killing again, he has to get Tuesday night Kristen to start bringing in, potential victims. She calls an Alice into her dream, and Freddy kills Kristen by throwing her into his boiler. And then Kristen's soul ends up going through Freddy and then into Alice. It was actually a really good optical effect. I thought it was a really good way they set that up. And I love that line, too, where after Kristen calls in Alice, it's like, how sweet, fresh meat. So yeah, so now Alice has part of Kirsten's soul within her, and she's even starting to do weird things. So she's starting to smoke, and then she's like, wait a minute, I don't smoke, but Kristen does. And Allison wakes up. Allison takes Rick back to Kristen's house, only to see her burning to death in her bedroom. And then later, Alice falls asleep during class and inadvertently brings Sheila into her dream. Then Freddy sucks the air from Sheila's lungs, making it look like an asthma attack. That's where you have the whole scene where it's like, hey, Sheila, wanna suck face? And she's like, no! And then it kisses her and sucks all the life out of her. Basically turns her into a desiccated corpse. And then he's like, you flunked. Because before he showed up, she's like working on her test, and she falls asleep, and then I guess it's like she built this sort of this invention for Debbie to scare the bugs away. So that's why you have this little robot claw thing that comes out after her before Freddy sucks the life out of her. But I'm not a fan of that. I like the learning is fun with Freddy thing on the paper with blood, but I don't. The stupid. It looks pretty bad. I thought it was a pretty shitty looking effect. But it just, I don't know. It was just like, what is this? It just looked like something out of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Like actually on the set of the show, like it was like a pipe or something and tubing that they took off the wall. So yeah, yeah, definitely not really the biggest fan of that. So Sheila gets killed by Freddy. Rick starts to believe her, but the following day, he has a martial arts inspired dream. Martial farts. And I like the lead up to it, where he falls asleep, and a bunch of cheerleaders come in the bat stall with him, and then it turns into an elevator with all this graffiti that just looks like it just is falling in a free fall. Then he gets out, and then he's in this like martial arts inspired dream world. Freddy's invisible, starts kicking his ass, telling him about you need to have balance, Rick's on, and all that. Because earlier you saw Rick practicing his martial arts, and a really fun scene where you have a great, you have a really good song by Drama Rama, I think, called Anything. You know, I'll give you diamonds, give you dun, 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 give you anything, anything, anything. It just got a great beat to it. And so Freddy kicks his ass. Then he gets up and then starts kicking Freddy's ass, which is cool. And he kicks Freddy's claw off his hand. And he's like, what are you going to do now without your claw, Freddy? And then Freddy uses the glove and uses it to kill Rick. I'm like, oh man, I liked Rick. That sucks. So Rick gets killed by Freddy with Freddy's claw because Freddy cheats in one-on-one combat. Alice begins to change after all of these events, gaining the abilities and personalities of her lost friends. So in a way, these characters don't die. They don't really, they stay alive within Alice, which I thought was a really unique way to keep them alive. You can kill them off, but their souls and their spirits are still alive within Alice. So she gains his personalities and abilities. She plans with Debbie and Dan to fight and kill Freddy together, but when her father keeps her in, Alice falls asleep and lives her worst fear that she will work as a waitress into her old age, which is a great sequence. And the way they set that up was fantastic. She goes in and goes to a movie and sits down, and then the movie that she's watching, which is an old black and white film, I think it's Reefer Madness, it turns into a black and white image of a diner called Crave Inn, which is a reference to Wes Craven, and then she ends up getting sucked into the TV, into the movie screen, into the film. I thought it was the way that it was shot, the way it was set up was brilliant. It was really well done. I really loved that. And she gets sucked in there, and then you have that scene where Freddy eats the meatball pizza with the faces, great practical makeup effects of the faces of the victims, and he ends up eating Rick. He's like, "Oh, Rick, you meatball," and he eats him, and he's like, "I love soul food," you know. Oh, so that scene is so cool. I just like that concept. It just that scene alone just shows the ingenuity that is in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It's not gore. It doesn't have to be, but it's still disturbing and still unnerving because it's like it's Freddy's poking at some guy. It's this Rick's soul and it's turned into a meatball, and he pokes his finger claw into it and eats it. I mean, it's messed up. And I really like the way that sequence is set up too, where you have Alice, Lisa Wilcox in old age makeup, showing up and, you know, talking to her younger self. It's like, what will be, honey? Don't have all day, you know. So it was one of those like, whoa, that is pretty scary. I'm gonna be working at this stupid diner until I'm like in my 50s. So that was a really good, really well done, really clever dream sequence. So you know, he ends up, you know, they have the soul food scene, and then Freddy forces Alice to give her another soul, and then he goes after Debbie because that's where it was set up, so he can go after Debbie. And you have another good bit of soundtrack, another good soundtrack choice in here, where Sinead O'Connor's "Put Your Hands on Me" or "Lay Your Hands on Me," and she's lifting weights and it's like, "Put 'em on, put 'em on, put 'em on me, put 'em on, put 'em on, put 'em on me, put 'em on, put 'em on, put 'em on me, put 'em on, put 'em on, put 'em on me." You know, it's like, "Lay your hands on me." It's just it's a great beat, and I honestly would say this film has the best soundtrack, like the best. The Nightmare 3 has, you know, some great Dawkins songs, Dream Warriors, and Into the Fire, but it's only 2 songs. This has more than one. It has Sinead O'Connor's "Put Your Hands on Me," or "Lay Your Hands on Me," either whatever. I think it's "Lay Your Hands on Me." Sinead O'Connor's song. You got "Nightmare," you know, "Running from This Nightmare," "My Tuesday Night." You've got Go West's "Don't Be Afraid of Your Dreams," which plays at the end credits. You have Vinnie Vincent Invasion's "Love Kills." You have the "Anything" song. So, you know, there's a lot of great stuff. You know, you have these really good soundtrack songs that are really cool. It arguably has the best overall official, you know, soundtrack in terms of songs out of the entire franchise. So Debbie, now she's next, and then you have my favorite kill out of the franchise, and it's the one that really affects me the most. Every time I see this scene, because the practical effects by Screaming Mad George are just so fantastic and so phenomenal and so realistic looking, it just makes my stomach churn. It makes me uncomfortable. And just the concept of it. And it's not even gory, and it's still one of the most memorable death scenes in a slasher film for me, where Freddy shows up, breaks her elbows pretty much. It's like no pain, no gain, and then she ends up turning into a cockroach. And the way that, because she's afraid of bugs, and the way that it's set up is just like the effects that Scream Mad George came up with, and are just gruesome and great to look at. At the same time, I'm looking away because it's so realistic, and I don't like creepy crawly bugs, especially cockroaches. And so she's got, like, her arms break out, out of her elbows, break out these cockroach arms, and then you're just like, and then she gets stuck in the Roach Motel, and then she falls down, and then she lifts her face. So that scene gets me, the one where she falls down, and her face is stuck in the glue, and she's screaming, and then her face rips off. And just talking about it, I'm about ready to hurl just talking about this scene. Her face rips off, and then she's like a cockroach, and then she's like, ah, and then Freddy's looking at her through the Roach Motel, and then he looks at her and he's like, you can check in, but you can't check out. And then smashes her and then crushes her. And they're like, ugh. And then all this, goop falls out. And it's just like, ugh. It's so gross. Like, just talking about it. Just seeing it makes my stomach churn. Talking about it makes my stomach churn. It's like, ugh. Really, it is a really gross scene, but it's the most it's the most memorable death scene for me in the franchise. Then Debbie's dead, and then Alice tries to ram Freddy with Debbie's temper, which she gets after her soul goes into her, but she ends up colliding with a tree, and that ends up hurting Dan. Dan gets rushed into surgery. Alice then returns home and readies herself to join him and face Freddy, and that scene is fucking awesome, because that's the scene I'm talking about, where she ends up getting ready, and that's not officially released. That music, which is a remix of Go West's Don't Be Afraid of Your Dreams, really. That's what it is. It's a remix version of that song. It's just a remixed instrumental version of that song. And it sucks that that's not available officially. But there are some links and stuff on YouTube where it's there, and it's an unreleased track. Fucking A. That's totally what it is. Fucking A, man. The whole movie, really. That's a good way to sum up. If I could sum up this film with one quote, it would be fucking A. Man, I love that scene. And I love that music. So she gets ready to face Freddy, and then Allison rescues Dan. And I like that scene too, where they're going in circles. Like they end up because they were actually doing that before they tried to save Debbie. They were going in circles, and I like the way they handled that. It was like time kept repeating itself. But then Alice rescues Dan from Freddy during the surgery, and of course Dan sees Freddy, and he's like, Krueger. He's like, well, I ain't Dr. Seuss. And then the two are then sent flying into an old church in their dream. And then Dan's injuries in the dream prompt the surgeons to wake him up, which leaves Alice alone to face Freddy. And Freddy has the upper hand due to his experience, but she proves resilient, using her friend's dream powers against him. And kicking his ass, like punching him in the face, kicking him. It's awesome. It's so cool to see. But of course, he's not really doing anything to Freddy, because he's just laughing at her, like, ha 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 ha. You've got the powers. I've got their souls. Come on. Then, of course, you have the Welcome to Wonderland. Alice. And I just love the production design of the church and the way it looks. It's just great. And this fight is awesome. Kicks Freddy's ass. And then it looks like, Freddy's got the upper hand and throws Alice around. And then she then remembers a nursery rhyme called The Dream Master, and then forces Freddy to face his own reflection, which causes the souls within him to revolt and to rip through him, and the arms pop out, and then like they have the whole scene with Steve Johnson company we're working on, where people start breaking through his chest, and then the souls all pop out of him, and it's not gory, but it doesn't need to be, because that's not really what the film's trying to do. It's just this really fantastical craziness, and the arms break out. It's the best climax out of the entire franchise, and the best Freddy death. There's absolutely no topping this death. Any Freddy death after this is just pales in comparison. So Freddy gets ripped apart by his own soul, by the souls of the children and the people that he's killed, and he gets his head ripped open, and the souls fly away. And then I love this line where Alice, she sees there's just Freddy's claw left, and she's all like, "Rest in hell," and then kicks his claw. Just fucking badass. Or either maybe she kicked the claw first or afterward. Either way, it doesn't matter what the order of it is. That line is awesome. Rest in hell. And then you have a few months later, Dan and Alice are dating. They approach a fountain. Dan tosses a coin in. Alice makes a wish. For a moment, Alice sees Freddy's reflection in the water, but then she ignores it. Then the end credits. And yeah, I think that's the one that has that Freddy rap song, which that's one rap song I don't mind. I don't mind that Freddy rap, because at least it has Robert Englund doing some rap in it. It's pretty corny, but it's better than the shitty rap song in Part 5. But yeah, that's Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. I mean, just talking about the film is just puts a smile on my face. It's really entertaining. It's a lot of fun to watch, and there's really not that many problems I have with it, to be honest. There's a few things. I mean, I don't even know if there's any like ever extra trivia. Oh, another director they were thinking about was Dick Moss. Was offered to helm the project, but he declined because of scheduling conflicts with Amsterdam. Well, I'm glad, because I like Amsterdam, and I don't know, I don't really care for the Lift. So. And Ellie Cornell auditioned for the role of Alice. So that's interesting. She would, of course, end up getting the role for the role in Halloween 4. So it worked out for her. She still got a role in a horror franchise. And so that's really all I can think of in terms of trivia. There's really not really much else. There really wasn't much. They were talking about on the DVD, like how they did some of the stuff, like how they did the makeup effects and things like that, and really where the most of the making of info comes from is this, because I watched this after I saw the movie too, my VHS of the making of a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. Why was this not on the Blu-ray? I have no idea why this is not on the Blu-ray. There was footage from it on the Blu-ray, on the DVD and Blu-ray, showing Howard Berger putting on Freddy's makeup. So I don't know why the whole thing isn't on the Blu-ray. There's some really great stuff. They talk about how they made the sequence, the cockroach sequence, of Screaming Mad George, and that was really some fun stuff. Screaming Mad George talked about how even he was uncomfortable researching all the cockroaches. And you have the character who plays Debbie, Brooke Theiss, was talking about how she actually had fun with the scene because she's a tomboy, so getting all slimy wasn't really a problem with her. She was talking about how it wasn't as uncomfortable as you might think, the cockroach sequence. There were some moments where she couldn't really move as well, but for the most part, she actually had fun with it. You have Alice, Lisa Wilcox, talking about the film and talking about her performance and how much she was having fun with it and things like that. And you get some fun stuff from Robert Englund talking about how he went into a Thai food restaurant because he was really hungry in Freddy makeup, and it scared the shit out of one of the guys so bad that he like threw the tray in the air and everything goes flying, and his face turned white. And so there's some fun stuff on this short documentary. It's about 40, a little bit over 40 minutes. I don't know why it's not on the Blu-ray. I have no idea why. That's really lame. But I just wanted to point, and it's on YouTube, and I'm going to put a link in the video description down below so you can check it out for yourself. If you're a big fan of this movie and haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it because it's really fascinating and informative. It's a lot of fun. The narrator is really kind of corny, a little bit too corny for my taste at points. And he makes a serious flub. He says, "Oh, the makeup effects by Dennis Miller." It's David Miller, not Dennis Miller. Dennis Miller from SNL and Weekend Update didn't fucking do the effects for Nightmare on Elm Street part, the first film or the second one. I just no, it's not Dennis Miller. That always stuck out to me. I'm like, that's a serious mistake. Um, but yeah, that's. I really don't know what to say about part four, the Dream Master, except pros. I already mentioned pretty much everything. The pros, the directing, the cinematography, the editing, the score, the sound choice, the soundtrack, music, the cast, the crew, uh, the story and all of that, and then the cool kill scenes. There's some really inventive, camera work and techniques. Good special effects, good visuals. In terms of negatives, it's really not that much. In terms of cons, like I said, just the dog piss and fire thing and killing off the Dream Warriors. I would have been nice to seen them make it, but it's just one thing that puts the film on equal footing with Dream Warriors. So yeah, I really want to say about the film. It's a rate out of 5 stars. I would give The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, 4.5 out of 5. It's on par with Part 3. It's one of the best sequels out there for me, and it's a film that I enjoy just as much as Part 3, and in some instances a little bit better, but just because there's a few things that I don't really care for, brings it down just to the same level. But either way, it's a great film. I really love it, and really don't know what to say except thank you for watching my review of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, Dream Master, and remember, Freddy Krueger is always eternal. And this movie will be eternally entertaining for me, and yeah, fucking A.